The vote is happening in the House of Representatives. It's a roll call vote, so it's insanely boring. It's just, person after person's name is being called. Representative Johnson, what say you? And, they're saying McCarthy or Biggs or whoever they're saying. So we'll see where this goes. And Kevin McCarthy gave a little speech this morning where he said, I deserve to be speaker, essentially. And Lauren Boebert, who somehow I saw this thing on the internet. I haven't verified it yet. In fact, I made a note to myself to track it down. But Lauren Boebert, who makes $170,000 a year as a member of the House and, had a failed restaurant, came into office 2 years ago broke and, in fact, in debt, and is now worth $40 million. Did I see that right? If you know anything about this, let me know. But I think it's what this says is that George Santos is the perfect candidate for the GOP. I mean, if you want the Republican Party in a package, if you want the poster child for the, to use an old cliche, for the Republican Party, it's George Santos. Here's a guy who literally made up everything. His mother died in 9/11 in the World Trade Center. Oh, no, his mother, or maybe it's his grandmother, survived the Holocaust. I think it was his mother that he said. That he's Jewish, but no, he's Catholic. He's an American, but no, he's wanted in Brazil. And this is where it gets really interesting. Brazil, now that he is a member of Congress and was, sworn in this morning, the Brazilian law enforcement authorities have said, we want this guy. Back a decade ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I guess 13 years ago, 2009, he wrote a bad check. Say he actually stole a checkbook from a fellow that his mother worked for, which raises another set of questions. Did he steal it? Did his mother steal it? And he used that guy's name and ID to write a $700 check at a store in the Brazilian city of Niterói, outside Rio de Janeiro. He admitted to this fraud in 2009, telling the guy who owned this little store that he was sorry and that he was going to make it good. He said, quote, I know I screwed up, but I want to pay. But then he never paid. And in 2010, he said that his mother told the police he had stolen the checkbook. And it's pretty straightforward stuff. And so now the Brazilian police want to talk to him. Are they going to charge him? Are they going to extradite him? I don't know, but it's getting really interesting. And we had a caller earlier who was saying, well, maybe the executive branch, the president, should set up an office in the Department of Justice, or Merrick Garland should set up an office in the Department of Justice to look into congressional misbehavior, shall we say. They can do that for criminal misbehavior, like when they went after Traficant. The last member of Congress to actually have to resign, he was essentially kicked out, but although he was kicked out of the Democratic Party first, Traficant, and he became an independent, and then he got kicked out of the House of Representatives altogether when he was convicted of fraud and, money laundering, as I recall. It was a long time ago, but that was the last time that a member of Congress got evicted for being a criminal, basically. But now it looks like he spent $40,000 on airplane flights that may have had nothing to do with his campaign. I mean, he represents a district in New York. Even senators don't do that many airplane flights. And when they do, they're from D.C., where they live and work, back to their home state over and over again. But if you live in New York and you're running for office in New York and it's in one or two counties in New York, I mean, how do you spend $40,000 on airplane flights? I don't get that. And then also, apparently, he was using his campaign funds for rent, which is illegal. So he might be looking at prison here in the United States. Very strange stuff in a very strange time. I think the subtext of this, though, and this is a really important point to make, or maybe the foundational, the underlying story, is that the Republican Party has been the party of hustlers and grifters for as long as I can remember. Well, actually, since the 60s, let's say, in a big way. I mean, the GOP had a reasonably good reputation in the 1950s, and I can remember the 1950s. But, you know, ever since Nixon, ever since 1968, the GOP has really been the party of grifters and hustlers, and Nixon was one of them, and criminals. And Donald Trump simply laid that out for the world to see and said, yes, we are officially grifters and hustlers. I mean, here's a guy who was convicted of fraud, had to pay $25 million to make whole the people who, you know, the students of his so-called university. $25 million in restitution. That's not nothing. And so why would anybody think it odd that Republicans would lie to get into office? Meanwhile, a senior aide to Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul, in fact, he's married to Paul's, what's the deal? His name is Benton. He's the husband of Rand Paul's niece. And this guy's looking at 20 years in prison for illegally funneling Russian money into Donald Trump's presidential campaign in 2016. I mean, his name is Jesse Benton. He's 45 years old. He's facing 20 years in prison. A Russian national wired $100,000 into Benton's account. Benton took a $75,000 commission. He's definitely a Republican. And wrote a $25,000 check to Donald Trump's account, claiming that he was the donor, when in fact it was a Russian. And this is probably just the tip of the iceberg, but really, you know, it raises this question. You know, how much longer is the Republican Party going to openly embrace grifters and hustlers and basically be the party of grifters and hustlers? How much longer is that going to continue? And if the Republican Party decides to clean up their act, and I mean, who knows? I think it's extremely unlikely. I mean, the grift works really well for them. Coming to Congress broke, and you know, 2 years later you're worth millions. It's pretty good hustle. And the Supreme Court has blown so many holes in our campaign finance laws that, you know, these members of Congress, they create these leadership PACs, they're called. And with a leadership PAC, you can take virtually unlimited money from anybody who wants to bribe you. And then when you're out of office, you can use that money, you can just give that money to yourself. You have to wait until you're out of office. But this is why so many of these members of Congress have $5, $10, $15, $20 million sitting in their political action committees that they have no intention of using when they're running for office. So there's that grift. Then there's also, you know, what are the various scenarios for Donald Trump's involvement with the Republican Party going forward, which is another really interesting question. I mean, so much has happened in the last week that, you know, we weren't live on the air to talk about. But this is one that I think is an open question. Is Trump toast? Is he dead in the water? It's increasingly looking that way, but we were saying that in 2016, in 2015, when he was running in the Republican primary. And he won the Republican primary without ever getting a majority of the vote. It was always pluralities because he was running against so many other people. I don't think he ever went above 30 or 40% of the vote in any of those primary races, but because he was, you know, he was the what would you say, you know, the tallest short person or the shortest tall person or whatever. You know, he was the one who kind of stood out from the bunch. He had the plurality. He could do that again. If the Republicans field a whole bunch of candidates, Trump could walk away with it. And the clown car returns, right? Or he could say, you know, I don't like this party anymore, and I'm going to go on my own and screw you guys, and I'm going to start my own party. Or he could run on the Libertarian ticket. Keep in mind, back in 2000, I believe it was, Ross Perot started this thing called the Reform Party, and it was still around and still a force in 2000. I mean, a minor force, but it was still around. And he made a serious exploration of running for president on the Reform Party ticket in 2000, 22 years ago. So if he does that, that hands the White House to the Democrats, right? You'd think. Or Trump plays the hits, wins the nomination, and is back in the White House when he's indicted. Well, then the question becomes, will an indictment help him the same way it helped Bibi Netanyahu in Israel? Here you had a right-wing authoritarian, sort of like Donald Trump, a grifter like Donald Trump, who was indicted, and Bibi Netanyahu is looking at the possibility of prison time. And he played the victim card. He said, oh, this is all political. These people don't want me and they hate me and it's all... Blah, blah, blah. And people said, oh, yeah, but it makes perfect sense to me. We'll re-elect you as prime minister. And bingo, he just, a couple days ago got sworn in again as Israel's new prime minister. Could that happen here? I'm not discounting this. I don't think it's, a totally crazy idea. So where will Trump flee to, and what happens? What happens with the Republican Party? What is the future of the GOP? Or are they going to just continue to putt along as the official grifter party? And if so, can that sustain them? I'm very skeptical.